It was a warm Thursday afternoon in a small city where people passed by quickly, busy with their own lives. On the sidewalk near the town center stood a woman holding a small boy in her arms. The woman, named Rachel, looked tired but determined. She wore a plain tank top and jeans, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. In one hand, she held a microphone that was connected to a small portable speaker. In her other arm, she carried her son, Eli, who looked no older than 2 years old. Next to them was a cardboard sign that read, "Help my son." Her voice echoed through the street, clear and emotional, as she sang songs she had written herself. Her songs weren't just music. They were full of love, pain, and hope. People walking by glanced at her, some dropping coins or bills into the small bucket in front of her. Others barely noticed and kept walking. But Rachel didn't stop singing. Her voice trembled sometimes when Eli coughed or stirred, but she kept going. Every note she sang came straight from her heart. Eli had a rare illness that required expensive treatment. Doctors had told Rachel that without proper care, he wouldn't make it. Insurance didn't cover all the costs, and Rachel had no one else to turn to. She worked 2 jobs, but still it wasn't enough. So she turned to music, her last hope. Music had once been her dream before life took a hard turn. Now it was her only way to fight for her son's life. Each day, Rachel took the same spot outside the corner bakery, where foot traffic was steady. She hoped that someone, anyone, would hear her and care enough to help. Some days she made enough for Eli's medicine. Other days, not even close. Still, she showed up every morning. People in the area started to recognize her. They admired her strength, but most didn't know how serious her situation was. To them, she was just another street performer with a child. Only a few stayed long enough to listen to the words of her songs, which told the story of a mother's love, a child's pain, and the struggle to hold on to hope when the world felt cold and uncaring. That afternoon, Rachel sang one of her most powerful songs. Her voice soared, shaking slightly as she sang about holding her baby close, praying through the night, begging for one more day, one more smile. Eli coughed again and rested his head on her shoulder. Rachel gently kissed his forehead and kept singing. She didn't see the old pink Cadillac that had slowed down across the street. She didn't see the man inside staring at her with a curious look on his face. He wore sunglasses and a long gold chain, dressed in a bright blue shirt. The Cadillac slowly pulled to the curb and parked. The man inside didn't move right away. He just sat and listened. He was clearly someone who didn't blend in with the regular crowd. Someone important, or at least someone who lived differently. Rachel noticed him only when the driver's door opened and the man stepped out. She kept singing, her heart racing slightly. She didn't know who he was, but he was definitely watching her closely. People nearby started to whisper. Some even stopped to look. The man leaned against his car for a moment, nodding his head slightly to the rhythm of her song. He didn't say anything, just listened. Rachel finished her song and looked down, wiping a tear from her eye. Eli stirred in her arms again, and she gently rocked him. The man walked slowly toward her. She felt nervous, but stood her ground. She had nothing to hide. Everything she had was already out in the open, for everyone to see, hear, and feel. The man stopped in front of her, then looked down at the sign, and then at Eli. His face softened, and for a long moment, they just stood there in silence. Rachel didn't know what to say as the man stood there in front of her. He looked at her for a moment longer, then gently pointed at her microphone. "That song," he said in a deep voice. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" Rachel held Eli a little tighter and replied softly, "I used to sing in a band when I was younger, but that was before everything changed." The man nodded, glancing down at the child in her arms. "Is he your only child?" he asked. Rachel nodded. "His name is Eli. He's sick. That's why I'm out here. I'm trying to raise money for his treatments. The hospitals, they cost more than I can afford." Her voice cracked a little as she spoke. The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. He handed it to her, and she took it with a grateful nod. For a moment he said nothing. He just looked at Eli, whose eyes were closed now as he rested against his mother's shoulder. The man bent down slightly and smiled at the boy. Then he stood back up and said, "I've heard thousands of voices in my time. Yours is different. It's not just your talent, it's your heart. Rachel didn't understand what he meant, but she could tell he was serious. She noticed people nearby were still watching. A few had even started filming the moment with their phones. Rachel felt a bit nervous, but also hopeful. Maybe this man was someone who could help. Maybe he had connections or influence. "I'm sorry," she said politely. "I don't know who you are." The man chuckled. "That's all right. Most people don't. My name's Marcus Ray. I used to produce records. Big ones. Back in the day. Now I mostly listen." Rachel's eyes widened. She had heard that name before. He had worked with some of the most famous artists years ago. He wasn't just anybody. He was someone who could change lives. "You don't need to be out here," Marcus continued. "You belong somewhere better. Somewhere where more people can hear you. People who can actually help." Rachel looked down at Eli again. "I can't think about that right now. All I care about is getting him what he needs. I'll sing on the street every day if that's what it takes, as long as he's okay." Marcus nodded slowly. "What if I told you that I could help with both? Your son's treatment and your music?" Rachel was stunned. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help a stranger?" Marcus looked straight at her and said, "Because once, a long time ago, I had someone sing for me when I was lost. That song changed everything for me. It saved me. And your song today? It felt just like that." Rachel didn't know what to say. Her heart was pounding. She had come out here just hoping to earn a little more for medicine, not expecting anything like this. "I'm not asking for fame," she said quietly. "I just want my son to live." Marcus smiled gently. "And that's exactly why people will want to hear you. Because you're real. Because you're singing with something most people forget to carry, truth." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed it to her. Rachel hesitated before opening it, but when she did, she gasped. Inside was a stack of cash, more than she had ever seen in one place. She couldn't even count it. "This is for Eli," Marcus said. "It'll cover his treatment and more. But I also want to talk to you later. About your voice. About what it can do." Rachel couldn't stop the tears that began to fall. She hugged Eli close and whispered a thank you through her sobs. People nearby clapped quietly, moved by what they had witnessed. Marcus reached into his Cadillac and pulled out a business card. "Call me," he said. "Anytime." He gave her one last nod before getting back into the car and driving away. The pink Cadillac disappeared down the street, but Rachel stood frozen, holding her son and the envelope. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small light of hope shining through the darkness. The next few days felt like a dream Rachel never expected to live. After Marcus Ray drove off in his Cadillac, her life began to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. The money he gave her was more than enough to cover Eli's next round of treatment. She rushed him to hospital the following morning, where the doctors immediately began the process they had once said would be impossible without thousands of dollars. They were shocked when Rachel handed over the payment without hesitation. For the first time in months, she saw relief in the doctor's eyes instead of concern. Eli was placed in special care and received medicine that had been kept from him because of the cost. Within days, there was a slight but clear improvement in his breathing. He smiled a little more. He had energy again, and Rachel could see a spark returning to his eyes. Though the road to recovery was still long, they had finally taken the first step. But it wasn't just Eli's health that was changing. Rachel found herself thinking more and more about Marcus's words. He had believed in her, seen something in her voice that even she had stopped believing in. She remembered the way he listened, not just to her song, but to her heart. That night, after she put Eli to sleep, she stared at the business card he had given her. It sat on her kitchen counter, simple but full of possibilities. She hesitated before picking up the phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number. It rang once, twice, and a familiar deep voice answered. "Rachel," he said, as though he had been waiting. "I was hoping you'd call." They agreed to meet the next day in a quiet cafe on the other side of town. When Rachel arrived, Marcus was already there, sipping coffee, a notebook and pen in front of him. He smiled as she sat down. "I'm glad you came," he said. Rachel felt nervous, unsure what to expect. "I've never done anything like this before," she admitted. "I just sang because I didn't know what else to do." Marcus leaned forward. "That's exactly why it worked. You sang because you had no other choice. That's the kind of music people need to hear." They talked for over an hour. Marcus asked her about her life, about her dreams before Eli got sick. She told him about the small band she used to sing in, about the songs she wrote in her room late at night, when the world felt too heavy. Marcus listened carefully, jotting notes down occasionally. Then he asked if she would be willing to record a few of her songs. Rachel hesitated. "What if no one likes them?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "They already do. They just haven't heard them yet." He explained that he still had access to a studio and a few friends in the music world who trusted his ear. He wasn't promising anything huge, but he believed there was something special about Rachel, and he wanted to help her share it. The next week was like something out of a movie. Marcus picked her up in the same pink Cadillac, and they drove to a small but well-equipped studio just outside the city. Rachel stepped inside, her heart pounding. It had been years since she held a professional microphone. The walls were padded. The control board looked like something from a spaceship, and everything smelled of fresh coffee and cables. But the moment she started to sing, it all felt natural again. Her voice filled the room, raw and beautiful. She recorded 3 of her original songs, the same ones she'd been singing on the street. Songs about fear, love, hope, and a mother's promise. The sound engineer nodded in approval after each take. Marcus just stood there with a proud smile, saying very little but watching every move. When they were done, he patted her shoulder and said, "You still got it." Rachel didn't know what would come next. She didn't expect anything fast. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel stuck. She had a direction. Eli was getting better. Her music was being heard. And it had all started with one song on the street and a Cadillac that stopped to listen. A few weeks later, Rachel found herself in a place she had never dreamed she'd be. On a stage under soft lights, holding a microphone not for survival, but for celebration. It wasn't a massive stadium or a fancy concert hall. It was a small local event hosted in a park, arranged by Marcus and a few friends from the music industry. They had listened to her songs, and one of them, a soulful ballad titled "One More Tomorrow," had touched everyone deeply. It was the same song she had sung on the sidewalk that first day Marcus found her. Word had spread quickly through social media thanks to the videos people had taken that day. And soon, others began asking about the woman with the powerful voice and the little boy. Offers started trickling in. Nothing huge yet, but enough to make Rachel realize her music might truly have a place in the world. She stood backstage, holding Eli's tiny hand as he looked around wide-eyed at the colorful lights and people setting up instruments. He was stronger now. His cheeks had color again, and he laughed more often. Rachel had tears in her eyes just watching him stand on his own. A few months ago, she had thought she might lose him. Now he was clapping and giggling at the drum test, unaware of how close he had come to being taken by his illness. When it was time for her to perform, a hush fell over the crowd. Marcus stood off to the side, arms crossed, nodding slowly. Rachel stepped up to the microphone. Her heart pounded, but she smiled as she looked out over the small audience. Families, musicians, strangers who had heard her story. Many of them held candles or signs that said things like, "We believe in Rachel," and "Sing for Eli." She took a breath and began. Her voice floated out over the field, steady and strong. This time, she didn't sing through tears. She sang with strength, with pride, with all the emotion she had carried for so long, but never released. The crowd swayed and clapped softly. Some people wiped away tears. Others simply listened, silent and moved. And when she finished, the park erupted in applause. She looked down at Eli, who was now sitting with a volunteer near the edge of the stage, and he waved at her with a big grin. That was all she needed. That one moment of pure joy made everything she had endured worth it. After the performance, several people approached her. A music blogger wanted to do a story about her journey. A local radio station offered to play her songs. Even a small record label expressed interest in helping her produce an album. But through all the excitement, Rachel kept her focus on Eli. He was her reason for everything. That night, as she tucked him into bed, he looked up at her and said in his soft, sleepy voice, "Mommy sing more?" Rachel smiled, brushing his hair back. "Of course, baby," she whispered. She sang to him quietly until his eyes closed, her voice now calm and full of hope. Marcus continued to check in, sometimes with advice, sometimes just to say he was proud. He had become more than a music producer. He was a friend, a mentor, and the person who gave Rachel a second chance. Her life was far from perfect, but it was moving forward. No longer stuck, no longer filled with fear every day. Rachel had something to hold on to. She had her son. She had her music. And she had a story that reminded everyone who heard it that even in the darkest moments, a voice full of truth could light up the world. All it took was one song sung from the heart, one stranger willing to stop and listen, and the courage to keep singing even when no one seemed to hear. Because sometimes the right person does stop, and when they do, everything can change. Just like it did for Rachel and Eli. On that sidewalk, beside a cardboard sign, under the watchful eye of a Cadillac that didn't just drive by. It stopped, and it heard her.